All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Organized Chaos Show. I'm Chris Ronzio, founder and CEO of Trainual, and today I've got with me Penn Moody. Penn is the CEO and the founder of Moody Eyes. And funny, Penn and I have known each other for quite a few years, so this is going to be kind of like a catch-up session. How you doing, Penn?
I'm doing great. How are you, Chris?
Good. So for everyone watching this, Penn and I were, I don't know if this was 7 or 8 or 9 years ago, but we were in a online mastermind group together and we got to know each other and each other's businesses. And this was 2 businesses ago for me. This is when I had a video production company. And so every month we'd get together, we'd do these video chats with a panel of other people. And then over the last 8 years or whatever it's been, we've fallen out of touch a little bit with the exception of an email here or there. And so I think this is one of the first times we're actually chatting face to face, right?
That's correct. So I contact you about Trainual, but you're 3 businesses or third business, and I've added 2 more locations. So
Amazing.
So it's still kind of like that was then and this is now.
So you haven't aged a bit either, except
Well,
you've got
neither.
a cool hat now.
Yeah. Well, neither of you actually. So there you go.
All right. So for everyone listening or watching, this is going to be a little bit of a different episode because Penn and I have been talking about this concept he has for thought leadership sort of framework about how to structure and systemize a business. Now, Penn is a very seasoned executive. He's had his business for a while. He's learned a lot. He's opened multiple locations. He was smart enough to sign up for Trainual and use Trainual. So
right. Exactly.
He's been through all that. And so what we're going to talk about is some of what he's learned and implemented in his own company and some of what he's trying to structure to share with others. So I think this will be kind of a peek into almost like a public meeting or a conversation that he and I would have had anyway. And we thought, hey, let's just stream this. Is that fair, Ben?
That's exactly right.
All right, so why don't you just a quick introduction for everyone else that doesn't know you like I do. What does your company do? How long have you had it? Talk us through the business.
So I'm an optometrist, and I've been practicing for, you won't believe this, but in May it'll be 45 years.
Wow.
So I've been practicing longer than you've been alive. So think about that. And
I got glasses recently.
There you go.
There.
Oh, those are nice.
Thank you.
So over the years, I've opened practices. I've worked in multidisciplinary clinics. I've worked in LASIK centers. I've worked in a variety of different settings. I always tell people in our industry, I've worked everywhere except a VA hospital. And so over those years, I've learned a lot about business by trial and error. I always say I have the bloody nose MBA because I ran into the wall long enough to learn stuff. And what I've learned is that a lot of businesses could use the perspective of age and experience, because a lot of stuff that I read and that I hear, and as having known me, that I'm an avid reader and studier of business and books and podcasts and all that. And I have listened to a lot of your podcasts, by the way, just so you know. And
thank you.
And so I feel like there's a complication level that a lot of people get to when they start to go scale, and they talk about scaling. And I think that a lot of businesses will never scale, but they can become much better. You probably saw that with your consulting, I'm thinking.
Yeah, the consulting, I had a plan to make it scale. And what was funny is I found 2 other consultants that could do what I had done, that were entrepreneurs, had sold their businesses, were looking for something to do. And in order to train them on Organized Chaos's consulting practice, I started documenting everything in Trainual. And so I had the software and I was training them with Trainual. And so as I'm putting it all in there, I'm thinking, man, maybe this thing is the opportunity. So I went a different fork in the road, but I agree. It was hard to scale that business.
So, scale that business, but also some of the business you consulted with, I think, would have a difficult time scaling or aren't going to scale. I mean, you own a couple of restaurants maybe, or a couple hairdresser things, or one, and you don't want to go to 12 or 20 or be a big thing. So totally. How do those businesses become better? So that's been kind of my interest.
So for anyone listening, I always said, there is not every business is built to scale, and not every entrepreneur is built to scale a business. And
Correct.
when I was consulting, I would ask people the context of what they hope to get out of their business. Like, do they want to have 100 locations? Do they want to have an empire, or do they want to have more time in their week? And that's a very different business. That's a very different path to get to those two businesses. So what was your path? What when you set out with your first location, where was your mind?
So I had just got fired, and and so I walked in on a Friday and in 2005, and at the end of the day, the guy said he wanted to talk to me, and he said, "Well, we're going to let you go." And I came back the next day to get my stuff, and it was already packed in boxes waiting for me. And
Wow.
so I didn't really have. So I talked to all the optometrists in my area about coming in and working with them, and basically I got a big fat "we're not interested."
Hmm.
So I was talking to my dad, and he said, "You ought to set up your own office." And
Hmm.
so I had all this experience and worked all these different situations, and in fact, had a couple of offices of my own. Um, and so I decided, well, that's what I was going to do. So I set up on a path of starting from zero and seeing where we could take it.
Hmm.
And so about 3 months in, we started in August of 2005. And in December of 2005, I realized that if we didn't change things, we were going to go out of business. So I convened a mastermind group, you might call it today. I don't know what you called it back then. I called people in business that I knew, and only one other person from the optical industry. And I said, we're going to have this meeting and bring your ideas, and nothing's off the table. And so we redesigned the whole business with a different, changed the name to Moody Eyes. Um, started that whole process, and then from there we've just been building it and building it and building it. As
Hmm.
so
Wow.
that's how I got started.
Well, it's interesting because I think a lot of people that wouldn't otherwise start a business can get that kick into action if they show up and it's their last day. Like would you have left the business to start your own if you hadn't been fired, or was that the push you needed?
I would say that 90% I would not have, and that was the push I needed. And I think sometimes you get to the a situation like that, and you're going like, okay, what can I do and what should I do next? And so
Yeah.
that's how, um, and then you do a look at your skills and stuff. Said, okay, I can do this. I didn't realize
Mhm.
how hard it would be, but I could do it. So that's
Yeah.
where we are.
Yeah, so right now, ironically, we're going through this crazy crisis, this
Hmm.
pandemic, and a lot of people are probably going to be faced with a similar situation where either they have the opportunity to start something because they see an opportunity and want to take advantage of it, or they get that kick where maybe they're laid off or their hours are cut and they have to get creative. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of entrepreneurs emerge out of this as well, I think.
Oh, I think you're 100% right. And I always laugh, you either take the opportunity or you're given the opportunity.
Yeah. So when we used to talk 8 years ago, you had one location, and you mentioned now
Correct.
you're up to three.
Correct.
So what was that process like? I'm sure opening the second one was harder than the third, and so can you share any tips of how you prepared to open more locations?
So I would say the first thing is we were not prepared to open the second one or the third one when we did that as well as we thought we would.
Hmm.
So to give Trainio a little plug here, I think the idea of our processes were still in my head way too much, more than I thought they were, because I
Hmm.
really thought they were, we had them well defined, but we really didn't. Um,
Yeah.
and so that was the first thing I learned. The second thing I learned is that at that size, you're still in the weeds, as they like to say. It's hard with a couple locations um, to still not be responsible for more than you'd like to, which is part of the scaling issue.
Yeah.
I know one of the things you've talked about in some of your podcasts is getting away from some of the things that the business does and letting other people do it, and it you have to get to a certain size to do that. The Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think there's this capacity problem where when you're running one business, you're used to running pretty lean. And when you go and try to replicate that business or hire more roles, it's like you need more momentum than you can afford to purchase. You know,
Correct.
you need to hire those roles before you can afford them, or you need to open the second location before you're confident it can succeed, or you don't have enough funding. And so I remember a few years ago being in a event I was in, and I had this concept of like standing against a wall and trying to throw a ball. And if you can't wind up, if you have no space to go back, you're not going to throw it as far. But if you can really wind up, if you've got that space, then you can throw it much further. And that was to me the aha moment that I needed to take a little more risk or be okay with taking out a loan or whatever to really scale my business. But not everybody wants that risk, wants that level of risk. So it's a tough thing to deal with.
So I think, yeah, I think one of the things you just alluded to is that it's not, I know you like that phrase, get your business out of your brain, but some people are really reluctant to do that.
Yeah.
And and reluctant to give that authority, power, whatever responsibility to other to their employees or key staff members. And I think one of the things that I learned also is that when you're running two law offices, this is getting to the third office. When you run two offices, you can be in one or the other.
Hmm.
When you get to three, it's too many.
you're
And
you're
so
in
you have,
fewer than you're in fewer than you're not in.
yeah.
So
And I had a lady tell me one time, a patient tell me one time that, one kid or two kid you match up with. Once you get to three kids, all hell breaks loose because now you don't match up anymore. There's always a loose cannon in the house.
yeah,
And so I
that's
think it's
funny.
kind of the same with offices.
That's funny. So any other big takeaways, or if you could go back and open those two locations over again, things you would have done differently?
So the first thing I would have done is do more plowing of the field, so to speak, which is I
Mhm.
would have done a lot more marketing ahead of time, coming soon type stuff. We're opening. We did kind of soft launches at each location because we didn't want to get overwhelmed,
Yeah.
and we did not get overwhelmed. So,
Mhm.
so I would say
Mhm.
that the first thing I would do is go back to make sure your marketing is really goes into that space. In our case, it would be a geographic area, but
Yeah.
it might be something else. But go in there first and really get people talking about you and knowing about you.
Yeah, you ever see those restaurant shows where they create a restaurant concept and they launch it and they've got an opening night with like lines around the
Hmm.
corner? And I
Yep.
always thought it was such a crucial component of that show to have, to test the concept with maximum capacity, have a line out the door.
Right. But my experience tells me I want to come back in a week and see how long the line is.
Yeah. And you mean
Just
instead?
because I don't know in those shows and in those kinds of situations how much of it is that
Oh,
beginning
yeah.
pent up
Yeah.
demand. So I want to come back in a week or a month and say, okay, are we still not necessarily running at capacity, but is it still doing well? Because
Yeah, part of it I think is a marketing. It's an image thing, like a club or something that wants there to be a line outside just to attract other people.
correct,
Like when we launched Trainual, I shut off the website for 3 months leading up to the launch, and all it was a countdown. It said like new platform is coming and put in your email, and we built up this demand of hundreds of email addresses. And I think if we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have gotten such a strong base of customers in month one when we
right.
launched.
Hmm.
And so I think there's a lot businesses could take from your suggestion there, that plow the fields a little bit, get some of that demand, get a list of customers, start maybe even booking appointments for before
Right.
the place opens.
Yeah.
What else would you do different?
Um, I would make sure that we had our key person was really who we thought they should be. I
Hmm.
think that we didn't have someone that they ended up not staying with us, and I think that and we had that actually in both locations. So I think
Wow.
maybe that's something I'm not very good at, or that I'm learning. So I would make sure that you have somebody, one person you can really trust and spend time with them and pour into them.
Yeah, great recommendation. So what does the future look like? Are you thinking of more locations, or what's wh-
Oh no,
what-
for our future, which is one of the reasons we're on the call, for our future is to solidify the three that we have, and then look at doing sharing some of this knowledge with other people.
yeah. Okay, so let's pivot into that. When you reached out, you said you'd been thinking about this for a while and had developed sort of a framework or strategy based on your perspective and the other content and conferences you've gone to. So, how would you frame up the opportunity?
So what we've worked on and what we've developed is something we call the 5 pillars. And those 5 pillars are really the 5 areas of your business you need to um, focus on, or really get organized. And one of the things, Chris, that I've seen a lot of in the stuff that I've read and conferences I've gone to is you come back with like 100 things to do. I'll tell
Hmm.
you a funny little story. A friend of mine that's built a really big business. He told me that when he comes back from a conference, everybody hides from him. And
Yeah.
and I thought he was kidding. And then I talked to his CFO and he said, "Oh no, we close the doors and we won't talk to him for a week because he's got to go from 150 down to like 3 things we can actually do." And
Yeah.
so I think we do that and then we end up getting nothing done, or not as much done as we should. And so one of the things we've started doing, and I don't think you've met my wife Connie, but she's a CPA and works our back end.
Hmm.
And so one of the things we do together is we take like a period of time, usually a quarter, but it may not be exactly a quarter, and we concentrate on one of the pillars and then really focus and dig down into that, and then rotate through, and then you come back to it. And it was interesting. Um, to jump ahead just a minute, when I sent you the basic one or the revised one,
Yeah.
and then I sent you mine, as I went through mine, I'm going like, wow, we're already outdated.
so so you updated the model and then had to go back and update your own. So
Exactly.
why don't you talk through, can you share the
Yeah, I'd
five
be glad
pillars
to.
just high
I'd be
level?
glad to. Yeah. So the first pillar is, pardon the paper flood. So the first one is model clarity. And one of the things that I think is that a lot of people, a lot of businesses don't really have an answer for model clarity. And you've talked about this in some of your podcasts of finding the ideal customer, defining the ideal customer, and even saying no to customers, or being willing to let them walk because you we're not for you.
Yeah.
And as Seth Godin likes to say, find your tribe. And
Yeah.
so I think the first thing is to really define that. I mean, there's some things we have to do about dig into the why are you in business and what are you doing and what's your message and how you differentiate yourself and get that really clear. And
Yeah.
one of the big reasons for all of these, frankly, but particularly this one, is to get your staff to understand what it is you do.
Yeah.
Because a
You
lot
know,
of the staff, go ahead.
I'm thinking of a story as you're sharing this. There was a meeting I had 2 weeks ago with our lead developer, and one of our sales reps had this huge opportunity, a big enterprise kind of customer that would be a multi-$100,000 a year type of customer. And most of our customers, our focus is really the small business, growing
Right.
companies that are 5 to 500 employees. And so our average deal size is like $2,000 a year, and we've got something over here that's 200,000 a year. So I call a meeting with the product team. We go through this 45-minute brainstorm session. I'm writing on the whiteboard, and at the very end of the meeting, the developer says to me, just throwing this out there, but doesn't this seem to be kind of against our core customer and like who we're trying to serve? And I just kind of put my head down and thought, yeah, you're right. Like this was
Isn't it? But isn't it great when one of your staff corrects you like that?
it was amazing. And it instantly flip my perspective, and I go back and I tell the team, I know this was a cool opportunity, but here's where we'd have to compromise our process or our product in order to get that opportunity, and that doesn't make sense for the greater vision of where we're headed. So like I can't underscore this pillar enough, because if you don't have this clarity, then how do you make decisions for the rest of the business? This is your filter to make every decision.
Well, and there's another thing I think that underlines this, and that's what you were just finding out from that meeting, is that they expect you as the leader to follow that vision. And so
Hmm.
if you get off track, they're going like, so where are we going? You're
Right.
driving the bus, where are we going? And
Right.
it becomes a problem. The
Right.
second pillar, we go ahead.
No, I'm scrolling through the list that you sent over. So I mean the things that this encompasses, this is like your mission, your vision, your, the goals you're after,
Yeah.
all of that sort of stuff, right?
Well, you got me reading the one thing, so your goal.
Your goal, not your goals.
Not
Yeah.
your goal is your goal. I'm
Okay.
most of the way through that. The second part is the simplified processes. And what we found was that, as I told you before, our processes weren't as good as we thought they should be. But the second thing is, um, they were too complicated.
Hmm.
And so a lot of times you can sit down and really, if you work through the processes, get that done. So we had an experience one time with a guy from a contact lens distributor, came and spent some time, a couple of days with us, and afterwards he was their CIO, and he told me, I got a ton of lists of things to do, because when I sat there with your staff, and I'm going like, you got to do what on the on our
Yeah.
website, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so a lot of times you can really simplify things, and that helps. Your goal really helps with that, but you also, really need to go back to me the fundamentals, and
Yeah.
make sure that everything. So we periodically, when we go through this, we almost tear it down to, okay, you want to order a pair of glasses, where do you start?
Yeah.
and
I
and
love
and a
that you
lot of
do
it
that.
we already have it, but it works. Go ahead.
This is like, if anybody's seen that show, The Undercover Boss,
Hmm.
and when the CEO is so removed from what's happening in the field and then gets back into the field and sees some of these things that have become so convoluted, and then they're able to just strip back the complexity and say, let's make this easier, let's improve the customer experience, the employee experience. I think everyone needs to have that mindset. You don't have to be undercover, but you need to be willing to dive back into areas of the business to see new processes with your perspective. Because, like that CIO, or like you mentioned, there's processes that you just have ignored for long enough for them to kind of get out of hand. And I saw this every day when I was consulting, where I'd interview someone about what they did, and they wouldn't even realize, like, until they saw it written down, they wouldn't see the redundancy of the steps or how frequently they're doing things. And there's simple things like, instead of doing these orders one at a time, what if you just batched them every afternoon? Like in my video company, we had a fulfillment where we were shipping out hundreds of DVDs, and we would do the orders as they came in, until that became so overwhelming that that's all someone was doing, was standing at the printer. And every day they do one, they wait 10 minutes, they do another one. And then we shifted it to where all fulfillment happens at 3 o'clock, because we needed it that hour before the mail cart came around, and
Right.
it made them so much more productive. So I love this. The idea of just revisiting your processes is a cultural thing.
There's another thing about that too, and you've seen this in the Undercover Boss, I'm sure, and that is that your staff will make adjustments to the process because, oh, something broke, or something's not working right, and you don't even know it. It's like, I'd buy you a new one, or have the guy come in and fix it, but you're doing a workaround, and that's really not what we want. And
Yeah.
so you find, because they're trying to be helpful,
Hmm. Which
but
is
they're
great, and
but
people
which is
are
good
want to be
temporarily, but not
resourceful.
good long
Yeah.
term. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. So that's pillar two, is the simple processes.
Correct. Pillar three is supply chain.
Okay.
At the end of the day, every business is a supply chain. You're selling something and you're delivering it to your customer in some method. And even if it, they call them deliverables a lot of times in the uh, internet world and stuff, but at the end of the day, you're delivering something. So I think it's important to revisit your supply chain periodically and really look at it and see. So one of the things we've done is we spent about really a couple years looking at all our vendors and shopping vendors and finding vendors that we really
Hmm.
like and can work with.
Yeah.
And once we got those, now we don't really look for other vendors very often, but we kind of make a list of people that we might call on if we decide to change. But I'll tell somebody like we're happy with the frame vendors we have, but we'll keep you in mind if we ever decide to change.
Yeah.
One of the there to me, there's two sides to that. The first one is your side, but the second one is their side. And so when I used to sell magazine ads in one of my earlier lives,
Okay.
and what I learned was, and the guy that taught me would always say, you live on yeses and nos, you starve on maybes, because maybe
Mm,
is a no that hasn't come yet. And
mm.
so what I do is tell people no, kind of as a, don't spend your time on me.
Yeah.
Don't
That's
waste your
very
time, because I'm
thoughtful.
not going to buy anything. Well, it
Yeah.
saves me time too. So
Yeah.
it's not all altruistic, but it really does force them to go find somebody that's going to buy from, because we're not going to. And so you can call on us every 3 months and we're not going to buy it. And we'll let you know if we are interested.
So the idea of this being a pillar is the recommendation that the business focus on optimizing their supply chain or getting quotes from other vendors, or what can people do to practically work on this?
Well, I think the first thing is you have to really analyze your supply chain and find out what you're really paying, how much you're really using certain vendors, because you can do volume discounts and all those kinds of things. Like if you're doing a
Right.
little bit here and a little bit here, maybe you do everything here.
Right.
The second thing is establishing some real rapport with them, so that when you call them, like I always tell our vendors, we're not a huge customer, but you're very important to us. So when we call them or need them, they'll be there.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. The third thing is really looking at what are you delivering, how much, and how much does it cost you, and how much it's cost to deliver, and all those financial things. But really, the idea of, I want whatever it is you order to be there for you when we say it's going to be. We make money at it, and you're happy.
Yeah.
So
So one idea that I did, we used to order these DVD supplies in bulk. We had cases, we had discs, we had ink, all these things that we would order. And the vendor that we got them through would give us quantity discounts, and we'd order in the biggest quantity that we could store in our place. And one time I was talking with my operations director. We were trying to slash some costs. He reached out to the company to say, can we commit to an annual purchase volume, but you store it at your warehouse and deliver it periodically? And they were thrilled at the idea that we would order in a bigger bulk because it locked in the sale for them. And we brought down our expenses like 18% on those materials, and we didn't have to store them in our place. So I think you can get creative about how you work with your vendors if you just ask the right questions.
exactly. And one of the things we've done with contact lenses is we don't deliver any contact lenses through the office anymore. We have a distributor that ships them to your house, and they're better at it than we are. It's the same kind of deal you have. We know we're going to buy so many lenses, but why do we
Yeah.
want to store them? Space, time, staffing, time, all that stuff. It's expensive, and
Yeah.
sometimes that getting it for $12 instead of 15, if you buy a whole bunch, doesn't really make sense, because you kind of pay as you go.
Hmm.
Your cash flow is based on what you go. So I like the idea, and we use a similar thing of annual supplies or whatever.
Okay. So let's move to pillar 4.
Okay, so pillar 4 is the marketing.
Effective
And we talked
marketing.
about that, effective marketing. We talked about that previously, a little bit earlier in the show. But I think that the old saying, half my marketing works and half of it doesn't. I don't know which half is which. You ever heard
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of the things is that periodically you have to really look at, who are you talking to? Are they the right people? Are you telling the story correctly? We're big story brand people. Are you familiar with
Yeah.
Don?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we've taken one of his webinars, and we love the story brand idea of, we're giving him a plug here, aren't we, Chris?
It's funny. I interviewed someone yesterday that gave him a plug as well. So this is getting a lot of credit.
Yeah. So it's a matter of finding what your story is and really telling it succinctly. And I think that takes some work. And what a lot of particularly smaller businesses, I think, do, and we've done it, we're guilty as charged, is, do this, do that, do this, do that. That sounds like a good deal. And it's like, okay, you don't have we didn't really have a plan. So we just wiped all that stuff out. And interestingly enough, in our business, what we found was so simple, it's almost embarrassing to say. We just get everybody's email and we send them emails every week
That's
because
one.
it's word of mouth and it's happy patients, and that's what we do. And we just quit doing a lot of the other stuff. We have a website, of course, and you can schedule online, but the whole thing is communicating with them. So
Mhm.
what I found was in my particular case is you get an eye exam and you come back a year for an eye exam and you hear from us about 2 or 3 weeks before the next eye exam. It's time for your eye exam, and you're kind of wondering, like, where were you? And so we're having this conversation, if you will, with them. Now, that doesn't mean that's the same for every business, but that's what we found by delving into this and saying, we don't need to spend all this money on awareness. What we need to do is talk to the people that are coming to us.
Yeah. So, with Trainual, obviously we do a lot of marketing. And what I've seen is that even just in the last couple of years, we go through these cycles where we are very focused on one type of acquisition channel, and it's working well. But then we become so dependent on that we want to expand and diversify to a couple other channels. And so we'll go through a cycle or a phase where we're experimenting and we're putting 20% of our budget is going spread across different things, and we want to see what else works. And then you get you get a little success here, a little success here. You ramp things up, and before too long, you're kind of in that place where 50% is working and 50% is not, and you don't know what is. And so then you have to flip and you go into this other phase, this
Mhm.
contraction, to say, what do we cut? What are we not seeing results for? Let's focus again. And so I think marketing and the idea of focusing on this pillar is a cycle of always knowing
Absolutely.
who your core customer is, and then experimenting with ways to reach them, measuring that, and then cutting back what's not working, ramping up what is working, experimenting, cutting back what's not working. But
Exactly.
it's a constant thing.
So you had on one of your podcasts, or one of the things you talked about going to Instagram,
Hmm.
which was a surprise. Logically, it was a surprise, I think, is kind of how you said it.
Yeah.
In that you would be Facebook, and Instagram's not someplace you're going to market a business to business, a B2B business, but it just seemed to work.
Yeah, what's interesting about Instagram is it's a platform where people are. And even if they're not looking to shop when they're on Instagram, they're looking for entertainment or something. If you can deliver the right message to the right customer, that they're interested enough that they engage by either liking the ad or they click through to see what is this thing, they get distracted from being
Right.
from their distraction, and they
Yeah.
say, what is this thing? Then you've identified that customer that you can retarget them later on more appropriate mediums. Like
Right.
they'll start to see ads when they're browsing on Amazon, or when they're on Facebook, or throughout the internet. And so for us, Instagram is a really great top of funnel awareness builder to just
Hmm.
connect with customers that might have some interest.
So I had a guy years ago that had a insurance agency in Indianapolis, and this was back when newspaper advertising was big, before all the internet stuff. And he
Hmm.
ran an ad twice a week in the business pages, and it would rotate. And he would just have a picture of one of his agents and a little blurb.
Hmm.
And he said, people think we're there every day,
Interesting.
but it's only twice. It's only twice a week.
Yeah.
And so from those kinds of stories and experiences, I've learned that. And I also go back to Steve Jobs' statement that a product is finished when you can't take anything more away without losing this essence. Do you remember
Mm.
that?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think marketing is the same way. Every once in a while, you just kind of have to dial it back and then say,
Yeah.
okay, how are we going to rebuild it with a fresh
Yeah.
look? But I
Yeah.
think, all these, you alluded to this, but all these need to be revisited on a periodic basis. But marketing is really important because there's a lot of money being wasted on marketing that you don't need, and there is money to be made on marketing if you do it well.
Right. Okay. So let's round it out. Number 5.
Number 5 is the finances. Okay, and you always get to that. And one of the things that Connie's taught me as a CPA is how to get your finances in we always use the term, we want our finances to be in such a position, if somebody came in to buy us, they would know what they're buying. And
Mm.
so instead of this looseness is really tighten your finances down, which follows the other four pillars, but also gets you in a position that, you don't know what's going to happen. So it's a good idea to have everything really tight. So just so you know, we filed our taxes yesterday, which is the earliest we've ever filed our personal and corporate taxes.
Oh, that's amazing. Good for you.
So
I think the government just announced a grace period, so you got it in even early.
well, we got a refund coming, so
Oh, there you
not
go.
much, but but so we didn't have to pay extra. But yeah,
There you go.
but it was kind of it's interesting because when we think about finances like money in the bank and all that, but it's really playing the long game of planning those finances, and of course you got to pay the bills, but there's also that whole thing of looking at it as a continuum as you go
Yeah.
along. And I know you got some investment money, so that they probably really looked at your situation.
This was new for me. So for 22 years or something that I've had a business, it's always been just me and my cash flow management and understanding the P&L and forecasting in a very basic sense. Investment, with venture capital firms and institutions and angel investors, and it's a different game. And so I've had to take a much more holistic approach to looking
Right.
at the business as an asset, and really carefully modeling things out, which has been a phenomenal education. So I think it's not my favorite thing to do, but I think everyone could benefit from seeing what good looks like. What
Right.
does a great financial package for your business look like, and where are the gaps that you haven't even thought about? I think that's a great place
Yeah.
to
And
look.
yeah, exactly. And dig into it. And I like that holistic term because it really is like a view of the future, because
Hmm.
none of us will be here long if we're not generating cash. I mean, it's you know,
Right.
and so the other thing that I've seen, and you may have seen this, but I've seen this from talking to patients and people coming in, people I know, is that a lot of people, one of the first things I did when I opened Moody Ice was decide that it's not my money,
Hmm.
it's the business's money, and I get paid from it. And I
Yeah.
know that at the end of the day, the IRS is going to say whatever money you made is yours and you're going to pay taxes on it. But that's
Mhm.
not the point. The point is that you have a tendency, oh, we had a good month, so I'm going to take more money out. No, you should put yourself on a salary
Yeah.
and be steady. And then somewhere in around the end of Q3, then you start planning for the end of the year. Um,
Yeah.
is how we do it. But I think that I've seen a lot of businesses get in trouble because they're too loose with that, personal income.
There's a threshold there that I think every entrepreneur crosses, where your business gets more mature and more stable when you start to draw a consistent salary.
Right.
And when you're in this game of transfers and paying yourself out, and you get a good client here and you pay yourself a windfall, and then you don't take pay for a few months, that's a amazing place to get to in the journey of entrepreneurship. Is this business pays me a consistent salary? And then once you get there, I think the next step is tackling some of this more holistic financial planning of your projections, and you could start to model things out with a bit more clarity.
Exactly. So I got to tell you a little funny story, and that is when I first met Connie 7 years ago, and we were talking, and she says, "So where's your inventory?" And I said, "It's in my brain." And she panicked. She goes, "Oh no, we're going to change that." And it's kind of
Yeah.
like that whole thing with Trainual, get your business out of your brain, get your inventory out of your brain. Let's make it for real. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of learning like that can go on, and that's why I say that I've been through all five of these pillars, and it was interesting as I prepared for this, I realized I got to go through it again,
Yeah.
which is one of the reasons why we were going to talk, because I think Trainual fits all five of those. Um, Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess just in summary to everyone that's watching, the 5 steps: model the clarity in your business, simplify the processes that you have, and continue to revisit them. Explore your supply chain management, optimize it. Make sure that your marketing is effective, expand it, contract it, keep investing in what
Analyzing it.
works. analyze it, and then have a clear picture of the finances. So, this is a unique way to look at what I think a lot of books or things talk about when it's, how do you simplify the craziness of trying to run and scale a business. And so the question for you, I guess, is what do you want to do with the framework? How do you want to share this? Where does this go?
So my first thought was obviously in my own um, industry, but I think that my personal love and care is for the small business person that is wants to grow, wants to be more stable, wants to relieve that stress. And I think that a lot of stuff that I've read and a lot of stuff that I've studied, as we already mentioned, is really complicated and you don't really know where to start. And it's kind of like you're in this glass dome and you're looking around trying to figure it out, and something's always behind you. And so I
Yeah.
think the best thing to do is to set out and work on those five. And what I would do is start those as a basic and then go through each one on a periodic basis. And so what I would like to do is to turn that into I hesitate to say consulting, but consulting business where you show people how to do that and
Yeah.
give them a guideline.
Yeah, I mean, when I had my consulting business, there was a very clear framework, similar framework where I called it clarity, chaos, and or context, chaos, clarity, or the three C's. And I had this whole thing I went through. And I think as a consultant, if you're trying to build a services business, you need to have some sort of framework like that because it makes your service a little bit more like a product. It's a little easier to approach every engagement. So is this something that you're wanting to do consulting work or build a consultancy around?
Yes, it's a
Okay,
short answer.
nice. So how could Trainual help? I think as I read through this, the analogy that came to mind was like when I was in college and I had a textbook that taught me everything and a workbook of all the exercises to do. And it almost seems like you could create content and videos and lessons to train people at scale. You could do that through a book, you could do it through a course, a video series to teach people about this. Trainual's template library could be like the workbook if you want to build out these areas to document these areas in your business. And then there's the services arm if you want to work more one-on-one with clients and have them pay you to help. That's
So
how I think about it.
yep. So I think that's smart. My personal observation and interest is in developing something that they can do without my help.
Okay.
And that's not to say that I'm totally against the consulting, personal consulting. But I like the idea of having more webinars and things like that to talk to a group of people, because I don't think I think that I could get bogged down in the weeds of each business. And what I want to do is give them I'm going to say a template, but a guide that they can work their way through and a method to do that. And go ahead.
So I've talked to a couple amazing coaches, consultants in different verticals. One is in the dentist space, one is in the chiropractic space. Something that they've done is create these operation manuals or guides for their industry from all their
Right.
experience, and then they sell them as a kind of a high ticket thing to a pretty narrow specific audience. I don't know if that might be a
That doesn't interest me as much as a lower ticket audience, a lower
okay.
ticket item to a larger number, because that's one of the things that I think people don't do. I mean, I have some of those books in optometry
Okay.
that sit on my shelf.
Okay.
And, I bought one from a guy that I know is good, but the book is this thick and it's like,
Yeah.
I don't have time to read through that.
Hmm.
What I think a lot of people are looking for is what next. So I'm going to segue for a second. So what we've learned about Trainual and what we like about Trainual is that I can make an edit, Connie can make an edit, a staff member can make a recommendation, and we can make an edit, and it goes out right away to everybody, as
Hmm.
opposed to having to retype and reprint and reinsert pages in a book. And what as I've looked through these 5 pillars and thought about Trainio, what I see is Trainio as a support for this, because it can be not only for your client, but for the person that is going to, I'll say sign up for the 5-pillar process. It can lead them through that, and we can update it and adapt it as we go along. So I think there's kind of a marriage here, because I thought at first really pillar 2 was where Trainio lived, and the more I've learned, it's everywhere. It's all through all 5 of them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. I think it relates. You know, there's things in your business to document and share with your team across all 5 pillars. So do you think it's a template sort of thing that we put in our library and you know, package it so where people can just add it to their account, or how would it be most accessible?
That's kind of what I've been thinking in general terms, is that if I develop this into a template type plan, and I'm not a computer guy, so I mean I can use one, but I always say if it's not on the menu, I can't find it, you know.
But Connie does it all, right?
Well, she does all the computer stuff, but neither one's are programmers.
Yeah.
You know, so the idea of creating it and then having it put into Trainio as an add-on, as something, as a guide, as you said, the workbook. Maybe in this case, Trainio is the main book, and this is a workbook that you could choose to use. And
yeah, so we'll have to look. Have you added any of our existing templates into your own account? Are you familiar with how they're laid
no,
out?
I have not. We've been dealing with some things like coronavirus and little things like that, you know.
Yeah, small things. Yeah.
Yeah, small little. So I haven't, and I plan to.
Yeah, so I'll shoot you some info after this call on the
Okay.
templates that we have in there, because we want to make Trainual as informative and helpful and easy to get started as possible. And so we would love to have other contributors that are thought leaders that build templates that are branded as something you've provided into the marketplace that our customers can then browse and just add to their account. And
Mm-hmm.
they're kind of very much like you've outlined. They're a framework where you might have a subject that's Penn Moody's 5 pillars, and all the topics are like the model clarity, and here's all the things to fill out in your business, and you've just given them the outline of the structure and asked them a few prompts or questions that they can then just delete your question and replace it with their answer, and then that edited subject becomes the guide within their own business. So I'll share some examples, but if you're willing to create some of those, then we could definitely promote them.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because I think that this gives them a guide, but doesn't really fill in the details. When we started Trainio, with all due respect, we didn't know where to start. I mean, it sounds really good. Okay, start a subject. Well, what do you mean by a subject? I know it's gotten better, but it still was a lot of like learning, like we don't know. And we didn't have these 5 pillars. We developed this after we started Trainio, frankly, because we needed some guidelines on how to work through stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that to me, it's a good combination. And to do that, I will, if you'll shoot me that, when you can work on that as time goes by, get that.
Absolutely. So I guess as we wrap up, for anyone that's watching, if they're interested in learning more about the 5 pillars, I don't know if you're willing to share the outline you've come up with or any of that content. Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, just connect with me. It's real simple. It's Penn, Penn at moodyeyes.com, because I haven't really set up a separate business yet. We're in the process of doing. I do have the URL, but I haven't set up anything yet. So, or they can just go to Moody Eyes and send it to staff at Moody Eyes. It comes to Connie. She'll take care of it. We'll get it done.
Perfect.
And
So
I am interested. I would share it. I really liked, by the way, I think I emailed you this, but I like your idea of share the expertise and sell the product.
Yeah. Well, in this case, I think the product is evolving, and the more you can get people, on board with what you're building and share the early stages of it, the better foundation we'll have to promote this. To say, we've already worked with this many people, and so I would recommend to start sharing it. Get just like you did in the early days of starting Moody Eyes, you send it to other people and say, like, no rules. What would you change? What would you
Yeah.
edit? How does this apply to your business? And then we can lump all that expertise and feedback together to promote this as something you produced.
I think that's a great idea because yeah, I think it's the idea of, again, get it out there and let people give you feedback. Kind of a group thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so again, for those watching, look out for something. Penn and I are just in the early stages of brainstorming this. I hope you enjoyed this sort of public meeting that we had, this catch-up session, and Penn sharing the 5 pillars that he's been working to architect. If you haven't explored Trainual, feel free to check that out and look for those templates in the weeks or months to come, and connect with Penn at moodyeyes.com. Penn, thanks so much for the time.
Thank you, Chris. I really enjoyed it. It was great seeing you again. Just don't
Likewise.
let
All
it
right.
go 8 years again, right?
All right. You got
All
it.
right. All right. Bye.